All right, so we're diving into this topic that I think you're really curious about, and that's natural forest fires.
Okay.
We're going way beyond just the simple fire is bad story that we often hear
Yeah.
to really try to understand its ecological role. And you've given me some sources that explore both the positive and negative impacts,
hmm
and particularly how climate change is influencing fire behavior.
Yeah. Well, it's really intriguing to think about the fact that for millennia,
Yeah.
natural forest fires have been shaping ecosystems, and in fact, many ecosystems
Mm,
have evolved to not just tolerate fire, but actually depend on it.
right.
This is really quite a fascinating relationship that we're going to kind of dig into.
Yeah, well, let's start with the very basic definition here. What exactly defines a natural forest fire?
Yeah.
How is it different from, say, a campfire that gets out of control?
Right. So we need to distinguish between natural ignitions and human-caused fires.
Okay.
So natural fires are sparked by things like lightning strikes,
Mm,
volcanic eruptions,
okay.
or even, believe it or not,
What?
the spontaneous combustion of dry organic matter.
Spontaneous combustion, so nature can literally create its own fire.
That's great.
That's wild.
It can.
But, okay, so then how can something seemingly so destructive actually benefit an ecosystem?
Well, you can think of it this way. Fire acts as a natural regulator.
Mm,
It prevents overgrowth. It maintains the balance of ecosystems.
okay.
It clears out dead wood and debris, which creates space for new life to take root.
Mm.
And the ash that's left behind is incredibly nutrient-rich.
Oh.
So it acts like a natural fertilizer for the soil.
So it's like hitting the refresh button for the forest.
Exactly.
Right. But I'm still stuck on this idea that fire actually increases biodiversity.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, different species have different adaptations to fire,
Okay.
and some actually need it to thrive.
Wow.
So take the lodgepole pine, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Its cones are actually sealed with resin.
Okay.
That only melts under intense heat, releasing the seeds inside.
Oh, wow. So it's like nature's way of ensuring regeneration?
That's exactly right.
It's ingenious.
It is.
But how does that create more diversity overall? I mean, is it just because some plants need fire while others don't?
Well, it's more than that. It actually creates a mosaic of habitats within a forest.
Okay.
So a variety of niches for different species to occupy.
Oh.
So you'll have some species that thrive in these newly opened canopy gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Others prefer the denser, older growth that survives.
Okay.
So it's about creating a dynamic landscape, not a uniform one.
So it sounds like fire is almost an artist shaping the canvas of the forest with these different habitats.
I like that analogy, yeah.
But fire isn't always, this delicate artist, right?
Right.
It could be pretty destructive, too.
That's true. We can't ignore the negative impacts of fire, particularly on human life and property.
Yeah.
Uncontrolled wildfires can destroy vast tracts of forest, lead to air pollution,
Mm-hmm.
cause economic losses, all very, very serious issues.
And what about the impact on wildlife? I mean, it must be devastating for, animals caught in the path of a wildfire.
It can be, wildfires can force animals to flee, and sadly, some may not survive.
Right.
But it's important to remember, though, that the negative impacts of fire are often magnified by human actions.
Like building homes in fire-prone areas.
Exactly. When we build in these areas,
Yeah.
we increase the risk to both human life and property, and in some cases,
Okay.
the suppression of natural fires can actually lead to a buildup of fuel,
Oh,
which makes future wildfires even more intense.
but we're essentially disrupting that natural balance.
Oh,
We're creating a situation where the negative impacts outweigh the positive ones.
That's right.
And then we have climate change adding another layer of complexity.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Climate change is a game changer when it comes to natural forest fires.
Mm.
We're seeing longer fire seasons,
Right.
hotter temperatures, prolonged droughts,
Yeah.
and all of these things are increasing the likelihood of ignition.
And those droughts are creating more fuel for the fire, right? So it's like a perfect storm for these intense wildfires.
Exactly. The drier the vegetation, the more flammable it becomes,
Yeah.
leading to faster spreading, more intense fires. And here's where it gets really complicated.
Okay.
Those fires release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which contributes to the very climate change that's fueling more fires.
It's a dangerous feedback loop.
It is.
So are we essentially making things worse with every wildfire?
It's a concern.
What can we do to manage this
Mhm.
in a world that's getting hotter and drier?
It's a complex challenge, but there are strategies.
Okay.
Controlled burns, also known as prescribed fires, can be a valuable tool.
So intentionally setting smaller fires to reduce the risk of a larger, uncontrolled wildfire.
That's right.
Is that really effective?
It can be, controlled burns help reduce the buildup of fuel,
Okay.
and they help mimic natural fire cycles.
Mm.
And thankfully, technology is helping. We now have more advanced monitoring systems with satellites and drones
Oh.
that allow for quicker response times.
So it's about using fire as a tool, managing it carefully,
That's right.
and making sure we can respond quickly when things do go wrong.
Absolutely.
But before we get into the specifics of fire management, you had mentioned some fascinating facts about fire.
Oh, yeah, there are so many. Did you know that under the right conditions, fires can travel at speeds of up to 14 miles per hour?
Wow. That's faster than I can run anything else that's surprising.
Well, some plant species, like eucalyptus trees, actually produce flammable oils,
Okay.
which encourages fires.
Why would they do that? Seems a bit self-destructive.
Well, it's an evolutionary strategy. The fires clear out competing vegetation,
Oh.
which gives eucalyptus trees an advantage.
Wow.
Remember, fire has been a part of these landscapes for a very long time,
Yeah.
and species have adapted in fascinating ways.
It reminds me of the story of Yellowstone National Park after those massive fires of 1988.
Right.
Those images were all over the news.
Yeah, those fires burned almost 800,000 acres. But what followed was remarkable. The park experienced a resurgence of life,
Mm-hmm.
with new growth flourishing in the wake of the flames.
It's a powerful reminder that fire can be both destructive and regenerative,
Absolutely.
a force to be respected, understood, and managed carefully.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum it up.
We've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still so much more to explore.
There is.
All right, so we've talked about how fire can be both destructive
Yeah.
and, this force of regeneration.
Right.
But let's dig a little deeper into the science behind fire behavior.
Okay.
You said that fire is complex, but hopefully you can break it down for us a little bit, what really drives how a fire behaves.
Yeah, you're right. It is incredibly complex, but
Yeah.
understanding a few key factors can help us make sense of it. It's not just about having fuel and oxygen and heat.
Mm-hmm.
The arrangement, the size, and the continuity of the fuel plays a huge role.
So you're saying it's not just about, how much dry vegetation there is, but how it's laid out.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so imagine like a pile of dry leaves versus a dense thicket of shrubs.
Okay.
The leaves, they'll burn quickly and intensely, but they might not spread very far.
Okay.
But the shrubs, with their interconnected branches and denser fuel load, can create a much larger and more persistent fire.
So a dense forest with lots of undergrowth would burn much differently than a sparsely vegetated grassland.
Exactly.
And that's why forest management practices like controlled burns are so important, right?
Exactly. By reducing fuel loads and breaking up that continuity, we can actually influence how a fire might behave
Okay.
and make it less likely to become a raging inferno.
Controlled burns seem like a pretty drastic measure, though.
Yeah.
I mean, aren't there risks associated with intentionally setting fires?
There are always risks, but controlled burns are carefully planned and executed
Okay.
by trained professionals, taking weather conditions and other factors into account.
Mhm.
But they're a crucial tool for mimicking the natural fire cycles that many ecosystems depend on.
So it's about finding that balance
Yep.
between preventing these catastrophic wildfires and allowing fire to play its natural role.
Right.
But even with controlled burns and our best efforts, wildfires still happen.
I do.
What are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to managing them once they start?
Well, predicting fire behavior is a huge challenge.
Okay.
It's influenced by a multitude of factors: weather patterns, wind speed and direction, topography, even the time of day.
Yeah.
It's not an exact science.
So it's almost like trying to predict the path of a hurricane, but with flames?
It is, and there's a degree of unpredictability
Yeah.
that makes containment incredibly challenging, and unfortunately, climate change is exacerbating these challenges,
Right.
making wildfires more frequent, more intense, and harder to predict.
That's right. We talked about that feedback loop, where
Yeah.
climate change fuels more fires, which release more carbon dioxide, making climate change worse.
Exactly.
Feels like a runaway train, honestly.
It's a serious concern. We're seeing longer fire seasons, hotter temperatures, and more frequent droughts. Yeah.
All contributing to this alarming trend.
But it's not just about climate change, is it? I mean, human actions play a role too.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about emissions. It's the way we manage our forests,
Okay.
where we build our communities. Even our recreational activities can increase wildfire risk.
So it's not just about fighting fires, it's about taking steps to prevent them in the first place.
Exactly.
What does that look like on a practical level?
Well, we can implement smarter building codes,
Okay.
encourage the use of fire-resistant materials, and creating what's called defensible space around homes.
Defensible space. I've heard that term, but I'm not really sure what it means.
So think of it as a buffer zone
Okay.
that's designed to slow or stop the spread of wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
So this might involve clearing vegetation around a structure,
Okay.
using fire-resistant landscaping, or even installing sprinkler systems.
So in a way, it's about working with the landscape, understanding how fire behaves,
Right.
and making our communities more resilient. Exactly, and we need to continue improving our forest management practices.
Oh.
Controlled burns are important, but we also need to think about making our forests more resilient to fire in the long term.
How do we do that? What does a fire-resilient forest look like?
Well, it's about promoting species diversity,
Okay.
thinning out dense stands of trees to reduce fuel loads, and even using prescribed grazing to manage undergrowth.
So it's about recognizing that fire is a natural part of these ecosystems
It is.
and working with it, not against it.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like a more holistic approach.
It is.
Recognizing that interconnectedness of climate change, human actions, and the health of our ecosystems.
Right.
But realistically, how do we get people on board with this?
Well, education is key. We need to help people understand that fire isn't always the enemy,
Right.
that it plays a vital ecological role. We need to move beyond fear and toward a deeper understanding of fire.
But there's still a lot of myths and misconceptions about fire out there.
Absolutely. People often think all fires are bad, or that suppressing all fires is the best approach.
Yeah.
They don't realize that suppressing fire can actually lead to larger, more destructive fires down the line.
Right, because it allows that fuel to build up, creating a tinderbox waiting to ignite.
Exactly.
It's a complex issue, and it seems like there's no easy solution.
You're right. There's no quick fix, but that doesn't mean we're powerless.
Oh,
We have the knowledge, the tools, and the ability to adapt. The key is to act now before it's too late.
okay, so we've explored a lot about the ecological wonders of fire,
Mm-hmm.
and we've confronted its destructive power,
Right.
and we've even talked about how complex it is to manage.
It is complex.
But now in this final part of our deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to look ahead. What does the future hold for fire in a world that's, being so intensely impacted by climate change?
It's a question on everyone's mind, and honestly, there are no easy answers.
Right.
But as we've discussed, climate change is really a game changer, right? It's creating conditions that are just ripe for more frequent and intense wildfires.
It feels a bit overwhelming, honestly. What can we realistically do to create a more fire-resilient future when we're talking about, a global issue?
Yeah, it's a global challenge, but that doesn't mean we're powerless.
Okay.
There's a lot we can do, both individually and collectively. We're not just passive bystanders in this.
Right.
We have agency, and our choices matter.
Okay. I'm ready to feel empowered.
All right.
Give me some concrete actions that I can take as an individual to make a difference.
Well, first and foremost, reduce your carbon footprint.
Okay.
Every little bit counts. Make mindful choices about your energy consumption, transportation, and even your diet, Support
absolutely.
policies and businesses that prioritize sustainability.
Okay. So reduce my impact on the planet,
Right.
which in turn you're saying will help mitigate climate change, lessen the risk of these catastrophic wildfires.
That's right.
Okay, but what about more immediate actions, things I can do to protect my own home and community right now?
Remember the concept of defensible space.
Yeah.
That's about creating a buffer zone around your home, clearing vegetation, using fire-resistant landscaping materials, and keeping your gutters free of debris.
It makes me think of, those houses you see on the news in California that survived these wildfires.
Right.
It seems like often they've implemented those kinds of strategies.
Exactly.
So you're saying it's not about eliminating fire altogether, but making it harder for wildfire to ignite my home.
Right. Essentially starving the fire before it gets too close.
But wouldn't these intense wildfires that we're seeing just jump right over those defensible spaces?
Well, no strategy is foolproof against the most extreme wildfires. Defensible space significantly increases your odds of survival.
Okay.
And don't forget about those simple precautions.
Like what?
Properly dispose of cigarettes, use caution with fireworks, and avoid outdoor burning on windy days.
Right.
These actions might seem small, but they can make a big difference.
So those are all things that are within our control. But what about the bigger picture? How can policy help us create a more fire-resilient future?
Policy is critical.
Okay.
We need strong policies that address climate change head-on,
Mm-hmm.
promote sustainable forest management practices, and encourage fire-adapted building codes.
Okay.
Support leaders who prioritize these issues and advocate for change in your community.
So voting with our wallets and our ballots, making sure our voices are heard.
Exactly.
But what about those misconceptions that we talked about earlier, like suppressing all fires?
Right.
What kind of policies could help change the way people think about fire?
We need policies that support community-based fire management.
Okay.
Policies that recognize the ecological role of fire and empower local communities to make decisions about how best to manage their landscapes.
It seems like a shift in mindset is needed. Moving away from that idea that fire is always the enemy.
We need to understand that fire is a powerful force,
Yeah.
one that can be both destructive and regenerative, and we need to learn to coexist with it, respect its power, and manage it wisely.
That's a tall order.
Yeah.
But it feels a lot less daunting when we break it down into those actionable steps.
Right.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
making conscious choices, and working together to create a future where we can live with fire, not just fear it.
I love that that's the spirit. We have the capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to find solutions.
Yeah.
It won't be easy, and there will be setbacks along the way, but the future is not predetermined. We have the power to shape it.
This has been an incredible deep dive,
It has.
full of surprising twists,
Yeah.
sobering truths,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately, I think, a sense of hope and empowerment.
I agree.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on fire. Not just its destructive power, but its vital role in, the grand tapestry of life.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you and our listeners.
Likewise.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
Right.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep the fire of curiosity burning bright.
Beautifully said to our amazing listeners. Thank you for joining us on this fiery adventure. We encourage you to delve deeper into the source material we've provided and continue your own explorations into the fascinating world of natural forest fires. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay fire aware.